you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hello, it's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, our listeners that makes it official. Welcome to 16 years and 2,500 episodes of the Chris Voss Show, where we just keep bringing you the most smartest minds, the most brilliant messages, and all the things you need to make your life better. We don't even bring shit on here to make your life worse. Those are other podcasts you can subscribe to. I think there's a big one of crazy conspiracies on Spotify. Go listen to that. But make your life better, because that's good. And the one way you can make your life better is to share. Sharing is caring. Have you ever heard that before? Well, if not, share the Chris Voss Show with your family, friends, and relatives. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, facebook.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, all those crazy places on the interwebs in the sky.
Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind.
Today, an amazing young man with a wonderful story on the show. His book is out July 21st, 2025. It is called Every Mile Matters, Turning Triathlon Training into Cancer Triumph. Dr. Jeffrey L. Reynolds is going to be joining us on the show. We're going to talk to him about his insights, his experience, and some of the things that he's survived in life and how he can give you an inspiring message of how to as well. He draws from 3 decades of public service with a dual battle of cancer. He transforms personal trials into powerful lessons on resilience, community, and the unexpected ways our challenges prepare us for what lies ahead. He's the president and CEO of Family and Children's Association, one of Long Island's largest health and human service organizations with a $28 million annual budget. He has dedicated his career to serving vulnerable populations. His leadership spans addiction treatment, mental health advocacy, and social justice, including pioneer roles with the Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, and 19 years with the Long Island Association for AIDS Care. Welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Thanks, Chris. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Thanks for coming. It's a pleasure to have you as well. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Sure. everymilematters.com and then jeffreyreynolds.com. It's Jeffrey Reynolds, common spelling.com.
Lovely. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's in your book, Every Mile Matters?
So, Chris, it was November 2021. I'm in the best shape of my life. I just completed Ironman Florida, which for folks that don't know is a 2.4 mile open water swim, a 112 mile bike ride, and then a full 26.2 mile marathon. If you don't complete it in under 17 hours, you start all over again and none of it counts.
Wow.
And so I finished that in 15 hours and 9 minutes, had a rough night's sleep that night, but I got it done. Fast forward a couple months, it's April Fool's Day in 2022. I'm driving down the highway on my way to a dentist appointment. Phone lights up with a notification. Stop at a red light, log in, scroll through pages of medical jargon I don't understand until I get to the punchline. April Fool's Day punchline. Clinically significant prostate cancer likely.
Uh-oh.
No symptoms, routine medical exam, feeling in the best shape of my life. And so I had to navigate it. 2 million Americans this year will hear the words, "You have cancer." Their lives will never be the same. And to be frank, my life was pretty upended. And, I had to wrestle with the fact that health and fitness aren't necessarily the same things. But as a young guy, I'm like, how do I have cancer already? But quite frankly, it occurred to me, and I'm like, look, I did Ironman Florida with cancer. I can deal with cancer. I can do this. I do hard things and I can get through it. And so I get treated for prostate cancer. Everything's good. I'm back out there. I'm racing. In fact, I ran the New York City Marathon that year. Didn't break any course records. Might have peed a little blood and lost a toenail. But I was back out there.
We could have gone without maybe some of that. No, I'm just teasing. We need to have that data. We need to know
so we got to add some edge.
suffrage.
Yeah.
Suffrage.
So look, I get through that. I've now become an evangelist for routine screenings. I did a PSA for the Prostate Cancer Foundation of America saying, get checked, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Taking my own advice, I go in for a routine colonoscopy. I have no symptoms, feeling good, that kind of thing. Wake up, doctor says to me, hey, look, I found a couple of polyps, but I also found a pretty significant mass.
Mm.
And so I'm off to the races, series of diagnostic tests, and I find out I have stage 3B colorectal cancer.
Oh, no.
Pretty serious diagnosis. And look, 2 cancers in 2 years, this one more serious than the first.
Yeah.
And so, Chris, I go through 27 rounds of radiation and chemo, take a short break, then get chemo infusions for over the course of 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of it, my doctors say the words that every cancer survivor wants to hear. I see no evidence of disease. You're good. Oh. So that, you're never good, right? And so you're always looking over your shoulder. So I go for every 3 months or so. And but look, so far I am doing it. And so the book is really about how I took the principles I learned during triathlon training, those early morning grinds, the late night grinds, the 100-mile bike rides instead of spending time with my family. Mm-hmm. And I took that grit, determination, resilience, and brought it into the cancer fight. Mm-hmm. Great example of that is, going through chemo is no party. I was on chemo for the better part of a year. I would get up in the morning, feel sick as a dog, throw up. And, I thought about it and I'm like, during triathlons, you throw up all the time, right? You wipe your face off and you keep going. And that's exactly what I did. And so triathlon training and endurance training just generally helped me get through what was some pretty dark times. If anyone out there, and maybe you haven't done an Ironman, but maybe you run a marathon. And miles 18 to 23 suck. There's no other word for it, Chris. It sucks.
Yeah.
And you go to some pretty dark places, including, why am I doing this? Like, nobody's chasing me. I don't have to do this.
The cops aren't behind me.
I'm getting the same banana that everybody else is, and the same dumb T-shirt and a medal I can't even wear to work on Monday. And so
I'd wear it anyway.
Well, I thought about it. Take that Flavor Flav look and go trekking into work.
You were in that.
But look, those are some dark spaces. And as I neared the end of chemo and radiation, there's some dark spaces. And, there were folks around me who gave up. I sat in infusion rooms with folks that, said, I just can't do this anymore. It's not worth it. And so for me, the endurance and the grit gave me the impetus to move forward, to move through treatment. And I'm back to racing. And in fact, last week, I joined my medical team and I ran all 86 flights up the Empire State Building as part of the race. It was a fundraiser for NYU Langone. And I'm back out there. I'm doing my thing. I hope it lasts. But, I felt like I went through this experience. The least I could do was share it with other folks who might grab some hope, some inspiration, or at least some practical tips in dealing with cancer or any other serious illness.
That's what we do on the Chris Voss Show. We get people to share their stories of survival and surviving cathartic moments, and they help uplift other people. Let people know that there's people out there that have a blueprint like your book to help people overcome. There's light. There's people that live with light. So be a lifter. And so I'm glad you shared the story. I mean, it's definitely a personal story of what we go through and all that good stuff. Now was the first, what was your age where the first bout of cancer? Was that 55?
Yeah, 55.
Yeah. So you're thinking, I'm still a young guy, right? Why is this happening to me? Do you go through kind of a persecution phase or a why me phase a little bit, or did you already have some resiliency where you're like, well, I can do this?
Yeah, I mean, look, you have those moments, but I think they're moments as opposed to phases. I think the biggest thing was, this feeling that my body had betrayed me. I'm like, you know what? I took care of you. I might have done some things in my youth that weren't smart, but by and large, look, I lived healthy. I go running and dodge the cigarette smoke outside of office buildings and dodge the cars turning into McDonald's, and I don't go there myself, and all that kind of thing. And so I'm like, I don't understand. I'm this healthy. There's that old adage about Jim Fix, the marathoner who died of a heart attack. And I had folks that looked at me and they were like, dude, like, aren't you an Ironman or something? Like, how did this happen to you?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, health has nothing to do with fitness, but
Sure.
here's the kicker. I think the emotional piece of it was made better by my training, and certainly the physical piece. So when I went to my doctors and I had this conversation, I mentioned that I'm on this clinical trial. And they said, look, the standard course of treatment for you have is 2 chemo drugs. And we have this clinical trial where we're trying out 3 drugs. It's pretty much as much of chemo as any human being can withstand. We think you can do it because you're in fantastic shape, and that's money in the bank.
Wow.
And so I'm like, sign me up. I want that, right? Because I want to knock this out. I was not, I had one doctor that started showing me meditation videos, and here's how you're going to visualize your tumor. I'm like, hold up, wrong guy. I want like the light beams. I want the heavy duty chemo. I want you to knock this thing out. And so my youth and my physical fitness allowed me to go down a treatment path that I might not have had available to me if I was into my 70s or not in good shape or not able to emotionally withstand it. Because look, chemo comes with side effects. Mm-hmm. I know that I've beat this thing, at least for the time being, but I also know that pouring a ton of toxic chemo into your body, there's no free ride. And so I deal with side effects now. I have neuropathy and that kind of thing. It doesn't stop me from running. Mm-hmm. But I realize, I beat the hell out of my body in Ironman. Chemo beat the hell out of my body this time around. And so, being in good shape, invariably, we're all going to get sick with something. And being in good shape kind of gave me that leg up when that time came, and I was better equipped to deal with it.
The one thing I'm always getting beaten up by is stupidity. I've been on that Twitter a couple times, so
that'll do it. That'll do it.
Media. Stay away, folks. Avoid all that, especially that Twitter. And I'm not going to call it what it is because it's still Twitter. It will always be Twitter. When it's in bankruptcy, it'll be renamed. Anyway, a little bit of callback bashing of the Twitter. We do it every show, I think. So you tell this story of what you went through. Yeah, I mean, imagine, there's kind of that bomb moment that everyone has when it first hits you, right?
Yeah.
Where you first go, what the heck? And sometimes that can be a pretty dark moment, or, just trying to maybe wrap your head around it. Like, how did I get cancer when I've eaten so much? And some people get stuck in that moment. They get stuck in the victim moment where, why me, poor is me, and they spiral. I remember Neil Peart had a Neil Peart of Rush had his only daughter between him and his wife, who was killed going off to college in a car accident. And his wife spiraled into this darkness and got cancer like within 3 months or 6 months or something like that. I mean, it's kind of interesting how we can make ourselves sick and almost kill ourselves with depression and darkness. And then she got cancer, and he just could not get her out of it. And she just seemed to want to go. And so there's some people, they respond very differently to those moments where they can't find their way out of it or see their way out of it. And so that's why books like yours and stories like yours is great, because it shows people there's a thing out of it. So you detail this all in the book. Talk to us about some of the things you do. Now I mentioned in your bio, there's some things that you do. Seem like there's some charitable work, if I understand that straight. And is that tied to your cancer or to the work you're doing with marathons and stuff like that? Or how's that work?
Yeah. So, I've been in the health and human services field for 30 some odd years, working for not-for-profits. At this point, I'm an administrator, but I still do some client work out in the field with disadvantaged communities here on Long Island. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, it resonated with me as I started to tell this story about my own journey, because I thought about the fact that for 30 years, people have told me their deepest, darkest secrets, right? And entrusted me, whether it's, somebody living with HIV, somebody with a substance use disorder, and I've been front and center on the fentanyl crisis here on Long Island.
Oh, wow.
Someone who's a victim of domestic violence. Like, people have entrusted me with their deepest, darkest secrets, and I've walked beside them as they've shared those secrets with me and told their stories. And I'm like, the least I can do is pay some of that back and tell my own story out there. And so I suppose there's a connection. And, quite frankly, running marathons, I always did that for charity and raised money. That's not how I got into it. I would say if somebody says, how'd you get into running? To be frank, probably a midlife crisis. Probably had nothing to do with doing good. It was either I dye my hair, get skinny jeans, and drive a Corvette around the local community college, or I take up running and triathlons and that kind of thing. And so, my running career started with 5Ks and then progressed to marathons. And then it wasn't bad enough to suck at one thing. I had to suck at 3 sports: swimming, biking, and running. And so it was really, a midlife crisis. But, the charitable work, I'll tell you, it's always figured prominently in my life. It figured prominently in telling the story. And the organization I'm with now, we're actually starting a cancer coaching program to work with folks like me who were newly diagnosed. Look, I had great access to resources. I'm a middle-class white guy who's well insured. My life is engineered for comfort, but there's a lot of folks that I saw in and out of the infusion rooms that didn't have the same privilege, didn't have the same access I did. There's folks that get diagnosed much later in their disease process and wind up, 2 weeks from diagnosis to death. And so anything I can do to change that equation by raising awareness or, matching people up with someone who has walked the road certainly would be a worthwhile contribution. So, I talk a lot about my cancer journey. I talk a lot about overcoming life's obstacles and that kind of thing. And hopefully at the end of this life, I will have contributed something meaningful.
Why is that important that we have that feeling? I was talking to somebody earlier today on the other podcast, and I've had people ask me, what's important in your life? Why are you here, Chris? I'm an atheist. I'm not. I'm pretty tolerant of everybody else. That's my thing. You may like Mountain Dew, I like Coke or something. Whatever. Yeah. And so people will be like, well, if you're an atheist, what do you believe in? I believe you should leave the world in a better place. I think you should contribute, give back, especially if you have those opportunities, and leave the world a better place than when you came. Because the people who don't leave the world a better place than they came, they're not really regarded as better people. But, that's what you want to do. You hope that you left some sort of impression on people. You left some sort of legacy. I would hope that the Chris Voss Show would somehow keep running in perpetuity, at least as a library. We've got so many people on this show over 16 years that have passed on, and we have them as a time capsule in the show. A lot of friends who appeared in the early years, they're still around. I'm like, did you go see how young you were? And 16 years ago when you appeared on the show, episode 5. But, to make the world a better place, why do you feel that's important? Maybe, I don't know.
I think some of it is giving back, and my cancer experience was like proof of that, quite frankly. People complain about our healthcare system, and certainly there's holes, don't get me wrong. Yeah. For me, though, it was a great experience. And every nurse I encountered, every doctor I encountered, just the incredible kindness was just, it was amazing. I think about it a lot, and I think we all take that for granted until we're in the position. For me, I went from literally overnight from being the helper, right? The guy people call at 3 a.m. when their teenager overdoses or their marriage implodes or their kids gambling too much, to the guy who needed the help, who's frantically Googling every medical term in his chart and pinging the nurses at 1 a.m. asking what this means. And so that role reversal was pretty eye-opening, and I think emphasized for me the need to do some good. The other thing that happens, and I think sometimes it happens just because of your age. For me, it didn't happen based on age. It happened based on, especially the second diagnosis, is you go from what do I want my legacy to be, to thinking more critically about what has my legacy been, right? So the tense changes a little bit. Yeah. And for me, that changed up pretty dramatically. And, I started to do that inventory. I'm like, I've always worked in the charitable world. I've helped thousands of people, tens of thousands of people. It's been great. What's the unfinished business and what do I need to do in order to complete my life? And that's not, it's not only kind of folks that come to organizations looking for help. I thought a lot about, the time I spent with my kids, the time I spend with my wife. At the time of my first diagnosis, my now wife and I were still new into a relationship, not married yet, still new into a relationship. We were maybe 6 months into it. And I remember saying to her, you didn't sign up for any of this. And if you need to tap out, I totally get it. This is going to be a ride. I didn't even know about the second time. She might have made a different decision. But, it really forces you to revisit a lot of your relationships and how you view those relationships and how you spend your time. In fact, I started the book during chemo sessions because you sit in an infusion chair for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I finished on safari in South Africa. I had always wanted to do a safari. And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing this because God knows what's going to happen down the pike. And so all those things in life that you wanted to do, go do them, because you don't know when you're going to lose the opportunity or be incapacitated by something or someone and unable to do it.
Very true. Very true. Chase the light around the world where you can. It's funny, you'll have plenty of time when you get old age and your knees don't work anymore. And wait, that's me now. You'll have plenty of time to think about all the wonderful things you did in life, or maybe contemplate what you wish you had done in life. I think that's what a lot of people end on their deathbed. I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done that.
Yeah.
I wish I spent more time with my kids and less time at the office.
Yep.
And, but what can you say? But that is why it's really important to have these things. And I'm glad you were able to write it down and stuff. Tell us about some of the speaking and doing. How can people reach out to you for that and know what you're up to there?
Yeah, so I've done a lot around men's mental health. Mm-hmm. I'm actually doing a fair amount of women's conferences. In some cases, I'm like the token guy. And the good thing is there's no line at the men's room when I do those conferences.
Oh, right.
I've spoken a lot about empowerment and overcoming challenges and kind of choosing how to live your life and designing a life that you really want. And so folks can hit me up at everymilematters.com, and I'm happy to talk to you about, doing your conference or your workshop. I've done a lot of cancer support groups. The number of people who have reached out to me, in the wake of the book to say, my brother got diagnosed, my husband just got diagnosed, can you talk to us? And, honestly, there's folks that just kind of track my cell phone down online and call me to say, do you have 10 minutes just to talk to me? And I'm always happy to do that. And so that's been a real big fun part of this. I mentioned men's mental health at the outset. And one of the things I write about in the book is how my relationship with other guys really changed pretty dramatically. And one of the things I noticed is I got a few friends, and it was like really across the board, friends who would start just pouring their hearts out to me, and we'd have lunch together. And at the end of it, they'd say, I love you. And it wasn't like the drunken slap you on the back. I love you, man.
I love you, man. You're great.
I mean, it was a truly heartfelt kind of thing. And, the first couple of times it happened, I didn't know what to say. I'm like, oh good. Nice. Thanks. See you, buddy.
Cool. Right? Yeah. Right. I'll see you on Grindr.
Right. Right. Good. And so it was odd. And then my second thought was, crap, am I going to die? Do they think this was the last time we had lunch and that's why they're doing this? Do they think it's time for me to check out? I mean, they say I look good. So that was my second thought. And then I realized, that really as guys, we don't really say that very often to each other. And I'm like, I don't understand what the problem is. God knows I've said it to thousands of women when I didn't even mean it. And so why is this so damn hard now? And so, so it was a real challenge. And one of the things that came out of that is all my guy friends and women friends for that matter too would say, look, if there's anything I could do to help, let me know. And there was no way I was going to ask for help. That's the reality. One friend in particular said to me, if you ever need me to drive you to chemo and just sit with you, I will. And I never took him up on that. And in a lot of regards, I regret that, because very often when people offer to help in a situation like this, it's as much about them as it is about you.
Yeah.
Right? It's an attempt to connect in a way that you haven't connected before. It's not that you necessarily need help. It's that they want to make that connection. And so for folks that are, struggling with whatever out there, whether it's a mental health condition or some other life circumstance or a health condition, when people ask you if they can help, let them in a little bit, let them help. What I always say to people who are on the other side of this, who say, I don't know what to say to somebody with cancer and that kind of thing. I always say, don't say, if there's anything I could do to help, let me know, because we will never let you know. Wow. If you want to do something to help, just do it. Ask for forgiveness later, but just do it. And so, I've had a number of people say to me, I don't really know what to say. And my response has been, yeah, that's fine. I don't either. We're good. We're in the same place because I don't know what to say about all this either. And sometimes just expressing to somebody, look, I care. Goes a long way, and that's all we need to hear. That's kind
of what they're trying to do. They're trying to find a way. I used to have trouble bridging the gap when people had issues, or their animals would die. I would have a hard time responding the same way other people do that are really good at it. Part of it was because I didn't have I went for like 27 years without anyone dying around me, so I don't have a good sort of like, what do you do with this now, and how do you help people? Yeah. But one thing is interesting is during COVID, we're all guys, my group, we never said I love you, and then COVID came. And, it was a dicey moment where, no one knew what was going on. No one knew how it was going to turn out. And you didn't know if you're going to see your loved ones or your friends or anywhere again. And you couldn't visit them in the hospital because that wasn't allowed. Right. You couldn't hold their hand or, be there with them when they passed. It was pretty fucking weird and dicey. And me and my guy friends, we call each other, because we're all sitting around at home, and we started just saying, I love you, man. Yeah. And we still do to this day. And at first, it was kind of weird because you're like, you're not my type, but now we do it. And I think we're just kind of connected better emotionally now. I think it was helpful in that sense. Maybe. Yeah. I think situations like COVID, personal health crises, they can either divide people and send you into a corner where you're rocked by yourself, or you reach out a little bit and let people in a whole different way that perhaps you hadn't before. And, I chose the latter, but that's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world for most people to do. It really takes some work to be able to do it. There's days when you don't really feel like doing it, but you understand that it's the right thing to do, that you're going to feel better as you make your way through this thing. There's a lot of folks out there who will say, look, cancer was a gift. Bullshit. Cancer is not a gift in any way, shape, or form. But I will say you can take some good out of the entire experience and turn it into something that enriches your life without it necessarily being a gift. The purpose of how you respond to stuff in life is all the difference. So you can respond to it negatively and be like, pose me and blah, blah, blah. Or you can respond and I'm going to not only figure out how to do this, but, it was like during COVID, I mentioned this before a million times on the show, but during COVID, one of my friends, very early on, when everything was just kind of like, whoa, it was just the boom of it all. And my friend said, he goes, here's what you do right now. This is the key. Number one, be a lifter. Go around and lift other people up. Or number two, find a lifter if you can't be a lifter. Yep. And that was a really important moment for me to see. It changed my perspective because I was getting the shit kicked out of me financially by all the events that we used to do being closed down. It was just watching like hundreds of thousands of dollars of money fucking burn. Yeah. And shit that I built 5 or 6 years worth of building on. And then of course you're dead in the water. Everything's dead in the water. And you sit and go, okay, well, what do I got to do? I either be a lifter or I find a lifter. And I'm not a good follower, so I just figured out a way to lift. And we changed a lot of things with the show and made it open to everyone and more stories of uplifting stuff. And I love that. I think everyone in this world at this point has been touched by cancer, whether it's a loved one. For me, it's a lot of dogs, leukemia, cancer for my dogs, or personally experiencing yourself. We've all loved someone or known someone we love or ourselves that are experiencing this. So I think a lot of people are, they understand this pain, agony, and struggle, and they're trying to see, what they can do, because it's kind of interesting how we take each other for granted, and then when something happens, we're like, oh, we should think about this person.
Well, and look, and we take our longevity for granted, right?
Yeah.
I never seriously considered that, and maybe I should have at kind of my age, but I never really considered that something was going to happen to me, right? And so you don't really think about that kind of stuff, and you start thinking about, what are people going to do with my stuff, and what's going to happen, and you live in a way that's somewhat precarious, and it's this duality where you're worried about tomorrow, but also incredibly thankful for tomorrow. One of the things that came out of this for me really was gratitude. And in the height of my triathlon training, I have a triathlon coach, and she would give me workouts, and my wife would say, "What do you got today?" I'd say, "I have to do 25 miles on the bike." It's not I have to now. It's I get to. I can remember sitting in the infusion room, like this, with a blanket over me and looking out the window and seeing people running by on the sidewalk outside and saying, I would give anything to be out there running right now. Mm-hmm. And now I am, right? I did a few miles before you and I jumped on. Took a shower, of course, before I came on, but I did a couple miles, and now it hits differently. Funerals, you mentioned funerals hit differently too, by the way. Every funeral I go to now is like a dress rehearsal for my own.
Wow.
I'm like, where do they get the maroon and gold from? Stop. They need to redecorate these places. But, there's more gratitude in saying, I don't have to run 3 miles today. I get to run 3 miles today. I don't have to go to work today. I get to go to work today. There's people sitting in an infusion room or in a hospice unit somewhere that would, kill for another day to run a mile or go sit at a desk and do some good work.
That's very true. That is very true. I remember when I turned 50, I do a lot of stuff for entertainment on Facebook, and it's kind of almost a stand-up thing I do over there. But I remember I turned 50, and I was doing kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, boo-hoo, I'm old now, old balls, and I'm 50, and the suffrage or whatever crap I was making. Everything hurts. I don't know. And I do a lot of performative entertaining. And someone wrote me, and they just cut right through it all, and they go, Chris, there's a lot of people who wanted to get to 50 and never did. So maybe you should just sit down and shut up. Something to that effect. Yeah. And I went, yeah, you got a point, man. Like, I should have some gratitude. Gratitude's really important. Why is gratitude so important in moments like these? To find recovery, to find renewal, to survive.
Look, I think it's uplifting, right? If you sit around and say, I'm thankful for the following 5 things that I had nothing to do with. Gratitude is getting something you didn't actually earn, right? And so, you're grateful for another day. You're grateful for a negative test result. I went for another test today. I'll get the result tomorrow. I'm not laying awake worrying about it anymore. But when that test result comes in and I remain all clear, I'll breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't do anything to earn that negative test result. It's a gift that you've been given, and how you use that gift, I think, is really important. One of the things I mentioned, you don't do anything to earn some of this stuff. Well, I was going through treatment. There's this notion as you're going through treatment that you're a cancer warrior, right? You're doing chemo. I had all the F cancer shirts and that kind of thing. I was one of those militant cancer patients. And, they call you a warrior. And there's a lot that's really attractive to me about that metaphor, right? You're going to go into battle. You're going to fight this thing. You're going to win it. You're going to kill it. You're going to come out on top. There's another part of me who's sitting in the infusion chair saying, how am I a warrior? What the hell am I doing? Like, unless I'm ready to cash in my chips, chemo's doing all the work. My doctors are doing all the work. I'm sitting my ass here in a chair, while the chemo's doing the job. How am I really a warrior unless, being a warrior is not giving up, and there's zero chance that that's going to happen. And so I really struggled with some of the terminology. And, once you kind of make it through treatment and you're on the other side, they call you a survivor, which, look, if that's the bare minimum, right? The bare minimum is just surviving. So the terminology around cancer, is something that I've given a lot of thought to. And while I think, there's something to the power of positive thinking, and there's something to be said for taking care of yourself, I asked my doctors, and I'm like, guys, how did I get 2 cancers in 2 years? And they're like, well, we don't know. Let's do some genetic testing and see if there's some broken DNA. Nothing showed up, which I was happy about because I have children, right? But I said to them, all right, so like, that's not it. What's the deal? And they're like, I don't know, bad luck. I'm like, really? That 150 years worth of medicine, billions of dollars of research, and this is what you have for me? It's bad luck. I should go buy a lottery ticket. And so, this whole notion of self-efficacy and how much do you really control? Like I wrote about it a lot in the book, and I thought about it a lot during my encounters with cancer. And look, I could have, stage 3B is a pretty serious kind of thing. You're only a hop, skip, and a jump away from stage 4. And, there's a group of us that were diagnosed around the same time, people I came to know, and 3 of us are still kicking. 2 of those folks died on the same day about 2 months ago. And so I look at it and I'm like, we had a very similar diagnosis. We had very similar lifestyles, and I survived and they didn't. And I got some of that survivor's guilt the same way guys do when they come home from war and, they made it and their buddy didn't make it out. So I've got a little bit of that. And I take that and say, all right, so then I have an obligation to do the very best I can with the gift I've been given.
And that's really what we need to do when we share our gifts, share our knowledge. You never know who you're going to help. You never know whose lives you're going to touch. You never know who's going to hear your story. And for some people, it's not just about the people who have cancer. It's like we talked about here. It's the people that, have the people that know people that have cancer, because that's a journey in and of itself. I've had dogs that have cancer, and it's affected me deeply psychologically and emotionally, and probably created some trauma. But knowing how to deal with that and how other people dealt with it, so you can find a blueprint to get through the world, is just awesome. Anything more you want to discuss or tease out before we go, Jeffrey?
Yeah, no, look, again, for folks out there who might be struggling with, whether cancer, some other serious illness, or some other life change, it gets better, right? You take it one step at a time. Every mile really does matter. If you find a way to get through a major life crisis or major life event, make sure you pass it along to somebody else. If you're of an age to get screened for, look, there's screening for 7 different cancers at this point in time. Get those screenings. Don't put them off. Look, if I had put off my tests, there's almost zero chance I'd be here talking to you today. Wow. And so for folks out there that are holding off on doing their screenings because they're inconvenient, they're lucky, they're yucky, all of that kind of stuff, look, the reality is wind up with a cancer diagnosis, and that's even more inconvenient. So get checked, love the people around you, take care of yourself, make sure that every mile matters.
Every mile matters, as you talk about in the book. And, that's really what it is. And every day, and eat right and take care of yourselves, folks. I recently had to go in for hernia repair, and it's the first time I had to go to the doctors for surgery or anything major in 35 years, something like that. I've lived an incredibly healthy life so far, knock on wood. And just dealing with the hospitals and the doctors, I have a great doctor, but dealing with some of the hospitals and the billing and you got to go here to go there to this, to that. And I just said the simple thing. I can't imagine when you have cancer where you're diagnosed, how many different doctor visits you have to do and medical visits and this, that. I mean, that's probably a whole new level that I never want to see. But just the hell of the simple part of what that was for my hernia, I wish I kind of experienced it earlier, because I would have taken better care of myself just to avoid the hospital crap. Yeah. But some things genetically, that's some of these things that are out there, that's the way it is. But always take care of yourself, folks. Please don't be like me. Don't, I don't know, maybe it was all that vodka I drank for 20 years straight that anesthetized the inside of me and acted as a disinfectant or something. I don't fucking know. There's a lot of booze, but I wasn't an alcoholic, folks. I just really had a good time. So anyway, thank you very much, Jeffrey, for coming on the show. Give us your .coms as we go out, so people can find out more about you.
Awesome. Everymilematters.com, JeffreyReynolds.com, and you can find me on all the major socials, except for maybe Twitter.
Yeah, well, you're not missing anything over there. It's mostly just, I think, a bunch of racism being thrown about and xenophobia. And just, I don't know, it's like a toilet. I think it's the toilet. They should just rename it toilet. Twitter, twatter, toilet. Toilet, toilet with a TW. So anyway, whatever. It doesn't help the guy running it. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. Every Mile Matters. Oh, we have an X account too over there. I don't know why I'm shaming my own account. Is the entitlement of his book, Jeffrey Reynolds, is out July 21st, 2025, called Every Mile Matters, Turning Triathlon Training into Cancer Triumph. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity, and youtube.com/Chris Voss, all those crazy places in it. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out. Lots of fun there.